Good morning. Here we are with Mr. Ryan Calo from University of Washington. And he is here for a technology event, a private event of TTGV. But we want to ask him a couple of questions as he's here present with us. Hi, Ryan.
Hi, thank you.
Ryan, as far as I know, you are from University of Washington. You have many contributions to the articulation of United States AI policies or studies. Also, you have a policy lab, technology policy lab in Washington University. Also, you have enormous contribution to World Economic Forum's activities. So here you are in Turkey at the moment. And what are the discussions in your ecosystem related to technology and specifically in the field of AI and machine learning?
Sure. So, as you pointed out, I run, along with two collaborators, Batya Friedman and Tadayoshi Kono, I run something called the Tech Policy Lab at the University of Washington. And we have support from the MacArthur Foundation and the Hewlett Foundation and others to look at artificial intelligence policy. And the Tech Policy Lab bridges three different disciplines: law, information science, and computer science. And so we bring together all those different things. We had occasion to host the President Obama, the previous US president, of course, President Obama, had a series of workshops on artificial intelligence policy, and the Tech Policy Lab hosted the first one. And there we talked about a range of different issues that AI presents. First of all, how does the government encourage its development responsibly? How does the government and industry ensure that that it's being used in the public's best interest, right? And then we looked at very specific questions like how safe is safe enough? For example, with driverless cars, and issues about privacy and equality, and what happens to jobs when AI can do more and more jobs. And so we looked at a range of different things, and after three more workshops at different places across the United States, there was a report by the Obama White House outlining what it is that we should do. We haven't exactly followed that game plan, but we did write it, and I was part of that effort. Yeah.
So when we try to classify people working on AI, I think we can easily divide them into three: the technology developers, technology utilizers, and also the enablers. And also it is a multidisciplinary thing. You should be involving, of course, scientists and engineers, as well as people from companies, also discussions from different aspects of our living. Can you give us some clues about what are you doing with the partnership on AI? First, maybe you would like to describe what is partnership for AI.
Yeah, so I'm going to return to your subdivision of people participating in AI, because I think that's very important, and I think it's important to understand what those different roles are and who might be doing them, right? But first, let me say that in the United States, there is this organization called the Partnership on AI, and it is a partnership between civil society, industry, and so in academia. And it has a big network of the major AI companies in the United States, as well as recently a Chinese company, Tencent. But that means IBM and Google and Facebook and Microsoft and all these different companies. In addition to big civil liberties groups like the ACLU, American Civil Liberties Union, and so on. The Tech Policy Lab at the University of Washington is one of the partners of the Partnership on AI. And the purpose of it is to begin to set certain kinds of standards for various values that we care about with AI, and to do so in a process that brings together a wide variety of stakeholders, right? And so to your point about there being, the enablers and there being the so on, I mean, I think that it's critically important, and I think the partnership on AI reflects this, that you need to have all those people in the conversation about what the value should be, right? I mean, in other words, it's not ideal, it's not appropriate for only the developers of the technology to be able to have input on what the values are, right? Also those who use the technology need to have that. And then you talk in terms of enablers, and I think it's true, there's a group of people that help to fund and foster and disseminate and educate people about the technology. But I think also in that group that you're calling enablers, there's also the people that should urge caution, right? And so it's funny, one of the real interesting observations about artificial intelligence in the United States is that there's some set of people who say, look, artificial intelligence is scary because it's going to take everyone's jobs, or even it's going to become conscious, and start to take over, right? And the people that actually make artificial intelligence, the people that actually create the systems, they say, oh, that's a silly worry because artificial intelligence is brand new still, and it's still developing, and it has all these problems, and it's really an immature technology. But those very same people who question the AI apocalypse by reference to how early stages AI is, they then turn around in the very next breath and say, but we should be applying it to our most sensitive social institutions like health and police and so on. And I think there's a room for caution. I mean, I think artificial intelligence is a very powerful tool, and in some contexts does a tremendous amount of good, but other times it's deployed without adequate attention to the limitations, right? So I think artificial intelligence is not going to take all of our jobs, and I can tell you why I think that. I certainly don't think it's going to become conscious and take over in the next few hundred years. And I think there are powerful positive applications, but there are also some things I've seen where it hasn't worked like it should. And so I think that I just want to point out that group enablers should also be channelers. Does that make sense? Yes. Making sure that the values of society are met. Yep.
So maybe tying up to your answer to my question, maybe the next question should be, there's enormous noise when you listen to what people are producing about artificial intelligence. So there are fake news, even misinformation, disinformation. Also, many investments are going around the world at the government level. Some large companies are investing more than some countries, IT companies. Also, there are some creative uses of AI, like social credit systems, like in China, as well as when we look at the algorithms, some of the uses can be called as misuse or abuse, like Cambridge Analytica issue with Facebook. Also, we see that the data fed is very important. When you feed the algorithm with the wrong data, then it can easily lead to racism or gender kind of discrimination. So within this much noise, United States and China are the top investors, seem to be the top investors on AI. Also, there are huge ecosystems in Canada, United Kingdom, Japan, from robotics point of view. Within this big noise, can you pick up a healthy signal related to the developing countries, and what are your suggestions for this? How are we going to find our way in this big jungle?
Yeah, so that's a very very well said. So first of all, one of the basic problems with artificial intelligence has to do with defining the technology and then defining its capabilities. I was testifying before the Federal Trade Commission in the United States, which is a body that polices against unfair and deceptive practice by businesses. And one of the things I was pointing out was that there is a lot of, I don't know if you have this word in Turkish, but hype, you know, a lot of overclaiming about the capabilities of artificial intelligence.
Let's say a balloon or bubble. Yes,
okay,
balloon.
Bubble,
yeah,
balloon. But
yeah.
not. I mean, and I don't mean a bubble in the sense of that it's all going to collapse. You know, it's more that there have been certain institutions and individuals who have an incentive to claim more or capability than exists. Okay. And that has a number of problems. Okay, so one of them is that the public, the Turkish public, the American public, has a wrong view about what the technology does. Right? They don't understand. They don't understand its limitations, and so therefore they are afraid of it, or they believe it's going to solve problems it's not going to solve. Right? And so when I testified before the Federal Trade Commission, I said, look, you know, when companies claim that their artificial intelligence can do this thing, and it can't, right? That should be understood as being deceptive, right? And so similarly here, there are a lot of companies, including some very big mature companies who should know better, that are making claims about artificial intelligence that are not supportable by the evidence. So one of the things I would say that the developing world should be very cautionary about is taking those claims at face value. Right? In other words, if a company says, we want to sell you this, you know, magical box that will solve some problem that you have, right? Having the ability to be critical about what machine learning, for example, can and can't do, right? Another related issue is there are also governments that have an incentive to overclaim as well. There was a great article I read by Jathan Sadowski, and he called it AI's Potemkin Village. You remember the Potemkin Village
Yes.
in Russian military history? You're a history buff, so. For those of you who don't, but this is this idea that that in military, as a part of a military strategy, what you would do is you'd create fake villages, fake soldiers, pretend tanks, so as to make it look like you had more military capacity than you did, and this was a tactic that was used. Anyway, he talks about how, for example, China has a very big incentive to overclaim the capacity of artificial intelligence that they're applying to the population, because if you're a Chinese citizen and you are thinking about whether you're going to get away with something that you're doing that the Chinese government might not want you to do, right? If you believe that the Chinese government has this magic AI that they're going to catch you, you see what I mean? You're going to behave yourself. So there's also an incentive on the part of government to overclaim the capacity of artificial intelligence. So I think that, you know, and by the way, artificial intelligence does some amazing things, and it's going to continue to transform our economy, and it's going to solve or help solve a lot of important problems. So I'm not dismissing that or minimizing that, but the amount of overclaiming and the amount of things like that, and it's really, it can be problematic also for the developing world. I mean, in the United States, we are actively considering whether or not we should have trade restrictions, export controls on artificial intelligence. So as you say, you know, it's being developed in the United States, Great Britain with DeepMind, certain communities in Canada, and so on. And it's being created by universities, and it's being created here in Turkey as well. And the question is, can we share that knowledge with each other? And if the government of the United States gets it into its mind that somehow this is a magic box that is dangerous to let other people have, you know what I mean? That's a problem, because that means that we could impose all kinds of restrictions on the flow of knowledge to other areas, and and so these are all dangers that come from misunderstanding the technology.
Yes, as an engineer, I also see that AI has the potential to easily become a new religion, maybe, because we can figure out the prophets that are popping up
Yes,
around the world.
indeed,
So,
yeah.
in order to have a healthier discussion, maybe, I have seen some examples, but these are getting more common each day. A Turkish professor getting the data from Japanese health system, using algorithms that are acquired from open source, using those algorithms and data together in the cloud to make the calculations, and then publishing it on IEEE or some other electronics international journal. So I think people are sharing some. And in the Turkish community, apart from engineers and computer scientists, just as soon as possible, the law system, people from law schools, started discussing on the principles, the future, as well as ethics. So, do you think those discussions are enough, or should we go somewhere else to found other things?
Well, I mean, I think it's really important as an initial first step, right? That we all think about in our respective communities and in our global community, what the right principles are to govern artificial intelligence. Principles are a nice way to reflect upon what our values are, our societal values, right? What is it that Turkey cares about? What is it the United States cares about? What do we care about as a global collective? But ultimately, the conversation cannot only be about principles and ethics. I mean, that's essentially where we are in the United States with privacy. If we have these principles and we have these, governance structures, but there are very few rules. And I think that at some point we need to be clear about what the rules are and what the standards are, and make sure that they're concrete and make sure that they match the values of society. So, for example, an easy to understand example is, how safe must a driverless car be before you feel comfortable having them on the streets of Istanbul or Ankara? You know what I mean? Yeah. How do you set that level, and how do you verify it? That's a basic question that we have not answered in the United States yet, and no amount of principle or ethics is going to help us there, And so I think that ethics and principles are very, very critical, but really they're critical in terms of just figuring out what the law should be. My colleague Anita Allen said this very beautifully. She's a philosopher and lawyer at the University of Pennsylvania. And she said that law floats on a sea of ethics, right? But ultimately, there's the boat or the island, I mean, it can't all just be the sea, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Also, it's context dependent. So the
Indeed.
ethics in one place might not be the same as the other.
And indeed, I want to make a point of, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no.
I just want to make a point about that, which is that, you talked about how there's the developers and the users and the enablers, right? If the only conversation about ethics is happening at the developer stage, then those nations and even not even the whole nation, but the little part of the nation that is building these systems, say Silicon Valley and Seattle and in the United States, then all of the values and ethics and so on that it's embedded in the technology will come from those communities, and then it will be exported to everywhere else, you know, as these tools get disseminated. So that is another danger, which is that only the values of a small community will affect all the users and so on.
Okay. Last but not least, as far as I understand, at some point we should be seizing or putting our foot on the brake and start developing the rules. Maybe some of them should be worldwide, and then coming with some laws, etc., to protect the people who are not that much familiar with the technology. And then afterwards, maybe not afterwards, but maybe in parallel, we should have some bodies. Maybe do we need some bodies, some organizations to control algorithms, data? Well, maybe in short, do we need an FDA for artificial intelligence at national level, state level, or even universal?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I've thought about this a lot. And in the United States, and we're having conversations about what is the best institutional configuration to govern artificial intelligence. I don't believe we need like an FDA for algorithms. I don't really want the government to be able to sign off on every innovation. You know, that is a dangerous idea. So what I would like is there to be greater expertise in government. You know, personally, I'm not interested in putting the brakes on artificial intelligence per se, right? I mean, what I want is that even as we develop it, we pay attention and are mindful of the values that it is subverting, and try to place some limitations and try to channel it. I don't want to slow it down per se. So one of the major first steps is making sure that we have informed policymakers. You know, I mean, you mentioned Cambridge Analytica and the privacy issues of Facebook and so on. You know, there was a hearing in the United States on the Hill where Congress spoke to Mark Zuckerberg, the founder of Facebook, about this. And it was this, I mean, I just, my own view, you know, it was embarrassing because the members of Congress, most of them, did not understand the technology and asked these questions that would cause you to, you know, you would say, you as an engineer would say, oh my goodness, what are they talking about? You know, there was a basic lack of understanding, and that lack of understanding wasn't just funny. It also led to the hearing not being very productive, because Mark Zuckerberg would say things like, we know that there's misinformation and disinformation on our platforms, but we're going to use artificial intelligence to solve the problem, you know? And there would be no follow-up. How are you going to do that? What do you, when you say artificial intelligence, what is it that you mean? You know what I mean? And where are you going to get the training set for that? And how do you correct it? You know, and so on. How do you end up labeling the threshold for false positives? You know, there's no follow-up because they don't understand it. And so I think a first step in the United States is to have bodies that in government that actually have technologists like yourself and translators like myself and so on. And that's going to be the prerequisite for wise governing.
Thank you for answering our questions under heavy jet lag conditions.
No, I'm,
Thank you for the conversation also, fruitful conversation. Bye.
Thank you very much.
You're
Appreciate
welcome.
it. Yeah.